Nice to meet you, David Lowery.
Pleasure to meet you.
Although I guess we've run into each other a couple of times, but...
Always in really busy, loud, and hard to get to know you kind of spots.
Yeah, right, exactly. And we'll talk next time. And so I'm glad for the occasion. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Well, let's say, get out of the way. You're going to have a couple of rooftop events, but Tuesday you're going to have a conversation with Ben Zeitlin.
Correct.
About anything in particular?
I'm looking forward to finding out. I think we're just going to just chat about making movies.
That's great, though.
And
liberating.
I'm looking forward to hearing what he has to say and trying to figure out what I'm going to say.
Well, I'm sure you guys, between the two of you, can wing it at this stage, I'm sure.
Yeah, I mean, if there's one thing I can expound on at great length with no shortage of too many words, it's filmmaking.
Yeah. And then tonight, you are going to be screening your new film, Aint, Body Saints, and a farm in Queens.
Correct. With
Rooftop Films, which is a really unique spot to do it. I don't think they've done that before.
I think from the time when we first started talking about this screening, it was definitely like the idea was to try to do something slightly new. So yeah, I'm excited.
Oh, I'm sure. In New York, this is the closest you'll get to
rural environment.
Yeah, but also, So as you're watching it, and then it's nighttime all of a sudden, and you're in the farm, maybe the smells, the air, the what have you. You'll feel a little bit more caught up in the moment. But I saw it, frankly, at BAM and got caught up. So
it's always the hope. The hope is that the environment sort of falls away, regardless of whether you're watching it at a 3,000-seat theater or at a farm or on your iPad.
Right, exactly. Well said. And then Friday?
Yes.
Your movie goes in theaters, right?
Open in New York and LA on Friday, and then
very good.
The rest of the country on the 23rd.
And also, is the on-demand component, is that happening now, or is it going to be down the...
That happens a week or two, like either, I can't remember if it's the 23rd or the week, but yeah, a little further down
shortly,
the road.
Though, but later in the month.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay. And also on the digital...
It'll not be on any digital platforms.
For a while? Very good.
Yeah, it'll be on demand, but the, iTunes and PS3s and such will have to wait a little while longer.
Fuck them. I don't know. Let's watch this movie in the theater anyway, because
that's the idea. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, everybody's movies deserves to be seen on a theater. That's kind of still I would think,
it's the gold standard for me.
Yeah, of course it is. And to see it and then chat afterwards and kind of let it, to see it, but it really has its full impact. So of course we urge you, if you can. If you're close enough to a theater that plays Aint Them Body Saints, go see it there, of course.
I would echo that.
I'm sure. But, of course, for a lot of people, maybe this is something you and Ben can or might even talk about. It is increasingly more difficult to get to a theater to see a movie like Aint Them Body Saints. That's the big issue, isn't it, right?
I mean, it is. And I know that I live in Dallas where, most movies open. It's a major theatrical market, but more and more, the theatrical releases are being pulled back upon, and the digital releases are what distributors are relying upon. So even movies that, maybe a year or two ago might have gotten a theatrical release are now just not. And so you kind of have to rely on those digital platforms, which is great. I love that. And I love the fact that had I not grown up in a major metropolitan area with a lot of art house theaters, I would have access to movies that I, certainly would have wanted to see and not been able to. Like that's a wonderful thing. Yeah. That being said, I'm glad that my movie is being released on the big screen to the extent that it is. By the end of the month, it'll be in 70 plus markets and on, over 100 screens, which, for an independent film these days is a pretty big release. Absolutely. What do you owe that to? That might be like saying, I'm asking you to say how good you are a filmmaker. but there's other stuff going on, right? I mean, there's a lot of really talented filmmakers who want to get their film that kind of distribution, and then the most, you'll play in a couple of theaters here and there, but, hey, you've got the demand, the digital, options, so... be happy with that. I think it really comes down to both making a movie that hopefully speaks its intent to be shown on a big screen loudly from the first frame onward. And then also just working with a distributor who luckily believes in that. And I know that IFC made their name in the past few years with on-demand and with digital downloads, but they really have faith in this movie performing on the big screen. And when they watched it, that's what they felt it needed. That's what we all felt.
They had a vision that you or shared.
They shared a vision. They shared our vision for it being a big screen release.
Guys. Yeah.
And so they're giving it that, which I think is a tremendous testament to both their belief in the film and their own, passion for great movies being seen the right way.
And believing a lot of people will find it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Because they're business people. Right?
At the end of the day, there's that too, of course.
Are you do you find that you're coming up in this generation now, do you find that you have to be a businessman to some degree? I mean,
I should be. I am a terrible one.
Are you?
I mean, maybe I'm not. I don't know. I haven't really had to quantify the degree to which I am good at business yet. Because, everything we've made has cost no money, so all the business was theoretical until this film. But yeah, there's a pragmatism to everything I do at this point, which is, I want to make a certain type of movie, but I'm also aware that certain types of movies are not going to make a lot of money in this marketplace, and you have to just make certain choices, that will predicate how the movies get seen or who will watch them or how much money they're going to make. Those questions and answers are always going to be part of the equation. And I think it's in a filmmaker's best interest to be aware of them and to be pragmatic about them.
There are a lot of filmmakers who are very pragmatic to the degree where they're actually saying, well, I'm shooting this. It's going to be seen on a phone even.
Yeah.
So I'm going to shoot it in this such way. Does that, to me, I would say that wouldn't dawn on, I'm looking at this movie in particular, and I'm thinking, there's no way you can see this on a phone.
Right. I don't, there's also the question of what are you interested in making as a filmmaker? And for me, making movies that are designed to be watched on phones at this point in my career is not something that interests me. That being said, I also think that, like I said earlier, if you are watching a good movie in, with headphones on, at the very least, hopefully the size of the screen will just kind of fall away. And I've found that in my own experience where I have watched movies on my phone, and maybe that's a little bit of a stretch because it's hard to pay attention to that when you have your peripheral vision. Your peripheral vision takes up more space than what you're actually looking at. But I'll watch things on my iPad or I'll watch things on my laptop screen, and you forget, if it's a good movie, you forget where or on what vehicle you're watching it, and it ultimately just my memory of the movies I've seen in that manner aren't all that different from watching them on a big screen.
Yeah.
The big screen certainly has some peripheral bonuses and especially if it's something that's being shown on 35 millimeter. But, ultimately the movie, the content of the movie, the presentation of it, all that boils down into just watching the movie itself, which as long as it's a good movie, that's what I'm going to hang on to the most.
Most of us that have come up, certainly my generation, saw The Godfather. I mean, we saw all these great movies, at least initially, on TV. We didn't think about, and it was interrupted by commercials. Probably, the aspect ratio was what it was. I don't know.
I didn't see Star Wars without commercials until 1997 when they did the re-release.
Is that right?
And that was the movie that made me want to make movies. So my understanding of that movie was
amazing to me.
Was heavily predicated upon the commercial breaks.
See, I distinctly remember seeing my dad take me to see Star Wars in Midtown. I remember the whole, it was one of those moments, of course, where you think you're going into some kind of cheesy, even at that age, I was thinking this is going to be some sort of cheesy, and then you go in there and you're literally a different person.
No, it was the same, except that my grandparents had taped it off of a broadcast television airing, and that was my introduction to it, but it still had that effect on me that it's had on so many other people.
Well, you certainly see the inspiration there in your films. Just kidding.
You could.
Of course, one could. Of course, yes. Always the battle of good versus evil, whether it's external or internal. Well, let's talk about your movie and this amazing cast. I really think is terrific. You've got of course, Casey Affleck in the lead role, and also Rooney Mara, and the great Ben Foster.
Very great, Ben Foster.
Yeah, he's going to be one of those guys. He's going to be like around, and not to say the others are
no,
around.
I know what you mean.
But you just know, right? This is a guy who's going to have because he does the risky thing. He'll take risks. He'll do these really non-commercial choices, let's say, however you want to put it. And then he's also doing it could be my take on it, but I don't think he is like looking to be the leading man necessarily versus a character role. Like, I think he could do either.
He's very smart, and he is very canny in the roles that he picks, and he picks things that are interesting to him and that he can really sink his teeth into. But he also understands the business he's working in, and so he'll do things like XMen 3 or Contraband, movies like action movies, and gradually builds up like this body of work that is like a wonderful mixture of commercial products and more idiosyncratic things that he really pours his heart and soul into, and it's not. And there are, a movie like Here, for example, that he did, the Braden King film, like that's not that's an art film, art with a capital A,
completely,
and he is able to bring an audience to that movie that wouldn't otherwise go because they've seen him perhaps in X-Men 3 or something like that, and I think that's a wonderful thing that he does.
Agreed. I went off the record. I was going to just share with you. My kid goes to a school in the same school as Braden King's.
Oh, okay.
And Derek C. in France. It's just this bizarre.
The director's kid school.
Well, yeah, Darius Martyr. I don't know if you don't know Darius Martyr, but he wrote A Place Beyond the
Darius,
Pines, and he's a documentary filmmaker in his own right. But
give me the loot.
Loot. Yeah, right, exactly. And then. Anyway, it's kind of the strange thing where, there's maybe it's not so strange. Maybe you see it in Dallas or in maybe some degree in Austin. But one thing I love about your film too is and I always appreciate when I didn't even realize how stocked it is with your friends.
Yeah,
Robert Longstreet, of course, is in there. You've got David Zellner, Frank.
Frank Mosley. Yeah,
of course. That must be very nice to be in a position where you can do that with.
It's great.
Tap into that pool of great actors.
You always want to work with your friends, and
sure.
and I've made a lot of really great ones, and so it was a no-brainer to me to I had a movie with certain parts in it, and I wrote other parts to make sure. Like if you read the script, Zellner's character was named Zellner because I was like I wanted him to play that part, and it's great. I mean, I look at it as sort of like we got a slightly bigger playground to play on with this movie than we normally do, and it would be disingenuous of me to not invite all the friends we made along the way to come have fun with us on it.
Right, but as you potentially as you grow as a filmmaker, you may have like less choice in there because there'll be somebody casting. And
I mean that's true, but hopefully at the end of the day, my hope is that if someone were to say, you've got this lead role, why are you casting your brother in it? I could understand that. My brother's not an actor that anyone knows, or he's not an actor at all. I'm just using that as an example. But like for us, if it's a smaller part or a supporting role or an opportunity for an actor to get a chance to do something they haven't done before, I would certainly hope that I would have on any movie I make that would be something that would be, an instant yes. Like I don't want to have to fight about that sort of thing. If the person's right for the role, I don't want to, and that's not something that is going to make the financiers, not finance the movie. Then there's no reason not to do that. And even then, like it's like you cast certain actors in there, and then hopefully, like the rest of it can be a non-finance. I hate the fact that casting has any sort of financial, that's the stipulations upon which you make the movie. That's always a frustrating reason to make any sort of decision.
To get financing, you mean, or just
to say like you have to cast this person to get get the money, and that's always frustrating. But that being said, I hope that in any movie I make that maybe 30% of the casting might be kind of related to that, and you're still making creative decisions. It's just within there's a certain rubric to them, and then the rest of them are just purely who you think is right for the part. And I've got lots of friends who I would love to keep putting in movies.
All right, well, let's give a little bit of a synopsis, I guess, about the film.
the movie, if you were to boil it down to its plot, is about an outlaw who breaks out of prison in the 1970s and sets out across Texas Hill Country to find his wife and former partner in crime and the daughter that he has never met. Mm-hmm. And that's the plot. And, that's about all there is to it. It's not a plot-heavy movie. It's more about an experience and about a tone and about just a fading sensibility, I would say. Mm-hmm. And those were the things that were, I purposely wrote a script that was light on plot and it had a very simple plot. It has a, very simple beginning, middle, and end so that we could focus on something other than the story beats.
Like you say, it was as a tone.
Yeah, it really, I realize it now, going into the movie, I had a very clear idea that that's what I wanted to do. And then you get caught up in the process of actually making the movie itself. And you just have to trust that you're going after what you originally wanted. And now that we're done and it's all sort of just like simmering and falling into place, like all of a sudden I realized, okay, here's the movie we made. I can see it clearly. There's some degree of objectivity to my perspective on it now. And I can see, yeah, that's exactly what we did. We made a movie that is about trying to capture a tone. And it's about trying to evoke a certain feeling more so than it is telling a story. And the story is important. And the characters are even more important, but they're all a function of this sort of elegiac tonality that was really what I was after with the movie.
Mission accomplished, I suppose you could say.
That's exactly what I went when we tried to raise the money. I was like, hello, Mr. Financier. We are setting out to make a magnificent elegiac tonality. Will you please write a check? And that's not what really happened. But you
cast elder statesman. The film, first of all, takes place in the 70s, as you mentioned, or right? Yeah. And then you cast someone, kind of a well-known actor from the 70s.
Keith Carradine.
And although we know now, because as I came into the lobby of the hotel, I passed Sam Shepard, we can, decide to leave that bit of information out because why make Keith feel inadequate? The poor guy probably already has a complex, but Sam was it was another archetype for you.
Yeah, I think I had what was it that I had just watched him in? There was something I had just seen him in at that point. No, Mud wasn't on the horizon yet. This was going much further back.
We did that more not how far back, like to his seminal days, or
no, just to Blackthorn, 2.5 years ago.
Well, he did Blackthorn.
He did Blackthorn,
which was the spaghetti western.
Exactly.
Thing, right?
And I know he was in Assassination of Jesse James with Casey, but this was prior.
Wasn't that?
Yeah, he played Brad Pitt's brother.
Yeah,
and this was even before Casey was in the mix. But I was, at one point thinking of making this movie for $100,000. I was going to make a very, very small, stripped down version of it, and I was going to cast, my friends in all of the parts. But we always thought maybe we can get somebody to play Scarrett. That can be the role that we get a well-known actor. Get Tom Skerritt to play Skerritt.
Well, you did it with Zellner, so
it could have worked out. That we did think about that, to be honest. But Sam Shepard was someone who I've always loved. I think the first thing I ever saw him in, oddly enough, was the Ethan Hawke adaptation of Hamlet that Michael Almereyda did.
Is that right?
And I loved him in that. I thought he was just so magnificent. I loved his voice. I loved the way he looked. And then shortly thereafter, I claimed to get to know. I got to know his work as a playwright and as an actor, and so he was just someone who instantly popped into my mind as a great archetype for that type of role, and then we explored a lot of different options. But Keith was also someone who came to mind very quickly and just seemed like the right choice. Like he had the right, not only skill as an actor, not only the right presence. But I always love this about older actors, but they carry all of their past work with them. And that sort of baggage is a very good type of baggage to have, I think, especially for a role like this, where, there's meant to be a direct link to a different era of filmmaking in the movie itself. And I don't want to limit any actor to the roles they've done before. I don't want to say that they're defined by that, but there's no denying that, anyone who has been in movies a lot is going to be, have all of the past work that they've done, following them, in their current performances. That's always going to happen. and you can either choose to ignore it or work around it or just embrace it. And I think this is the kind of movie where you want to embrace that.
I probably missed a lot of his films, but this is Keith in a kind of a quiet strength mode. I mean, he's sort of he's not a heavy in the film by any stretch, but in fact, he kind of provides a certain moral,
moral center of a sort,
right, of a sort of that, right, and he's a tough guy, and you don't see. So it's a little bit against type, not quite maybe Albert Brooks and Drive type change, but you don't see like that kind of.
Well, it's funny because I don't from between the 80s and now, like I hadn't seen him in a lot, and he's acted consistently. He's done a great deal of theater, and
he did Dexter.
But the thing that I saw him in that made me think about him for this part was Deadwood. And he played Wild Bill.
Oh, right, for the first few episodes.
Yeah. And
that was great.
And he had just so much... Because, my memory of him is Nashville and McCabe, Mrs. Miller.
Yes.
And then Thieves Like Us as well, but especially Nashville, where he's just so hopeful and young and idealistic and such a dreamer and so just happy.
I got a name.
And so... all of a sudden, he's matured into this elder statesman sort of character with an intense gravity to him.
Yeah.
And that was exactly what this character needed. And I love that there's like this delineation that goes back to, you've seen him in his early days in these other movies.
Yeah.
And now, he's got a part that fits in with those older movies, but it's a different role, but he's filling a different part of that world out. And it's something that Soderbergh did like beautifully in The Limey in a very overt manner, where he just used footage from Terrence Stamp's older movies to sort of paint a portrait of this guy's life.
Yeah.
And that's what, when you cast someone like that, you're kind of doing that theoretically anyway on a meta level. So that was a case of him just making it very overt. But I love that. And I think that in this movie, in Ain't the Body Saints, the scene where those three guys show up at his shop and come in and talk to him, like there's... that scene is if any scene in the movie is a direct homage, that's an homage to when those three guys show up at the bar and McCabe, Mrs. Miller, and one of them confronts Keith on the bridge. Like it's a the scenes are written in the same tenor, and I love the idea of that character and this character, and just like imagining that whatever strand traverses the decade between those movies.
I was first going to say, you're obviously influenced, as so many of your filmmakers' generation are so influenced by the 70s, Altman, Malick, and all these guys. But actually what I'm also wondering is if there's some sort of sensibility from having grown up in Texas, which is influencing the stories you're telling.
I think so. I mean, I think that it's not anything that is specifically overt about Texas. Like, I don't look out the window and see these stories playing out in my backyard.
No, you grew up in a major city.
Yeah,
I understand that.
Exactly. But there is like a sensibility to Texas. And the fact, I mean, one of the most notable things to me is that you can live in a major city and drive for 10 minutes and be out in the middle of nowhere.
Most of them, not this one.
No, that city.
Yeah.
That city specifically. Dallas, Fort Worth.
If you drive 10 minutes,
Austin.
You're still in New York.
Yeah.
Another
And
10 minutes, you're still in New York.
And you're
if you
generally
do that about a dozen or two times, then you'll be in Philadelphia.
Yeah.
That's about it.
If you've managed to actually get past your block.
Yeah.
But no, like the fact that you can be in Texas in a big city like Dallas or Fort Worth and then just 15 minutes later be out in pasture land. And when I first moved to Texas when I was 7 years old, I hated it. Like I went there thinking it was going to be all dusty and with horses, just the general cliches of Texas.
That's funny.
And that's not what it was at all, but it took me quite a while to realize that I liked it. And a little bit longer than that to realize I loved it. And then at a certain point, it just became part of my identity. And one of the things that I love about it is the landscape. I love just the way, especially in North Texas where I live, I love the way it looks sort of like this weird cross section between the Midwestern plains and these rolling rocky hills, which is just really, it's beautiful. And the way the trees crop up against the landscape is something that I never get tired of looking at. And the sky itself, all the cliches about the Texas sky being bigger, I think are completely true. And then there's the attitude of it, which is a tricky thing because the attitude of Texans has led to a lot of political stuff that I don't like and don't agree with, but it also is undeniably rebellious and independent, and I like that. I like that a lot, and that is something that really, I think, is one of the reasons that it has become such a hot spot for filmmakers, and especially independent filmmakers.
My goodness, yeah, we're going to get to that too. Yeah, and also, by the way, the two words you use, rebellious and independent, those are how you would have described America in its roots.
100%, exactly.
And you're making a very American
movie,
yeah.
and the fact that the Texas flag is the only state flag that is allowed to be flown at the same level as the United States flag is one of those little pieces of trivia that I just love. I think that's terrific. And that speaks a lot to that attitude. And so, I mean, I never set out initially to tell stories about Texas, but the stories I was wanting to tell seemed to work the best there. And being set in Texas added something to them. So that's why with Aint the Body Saints, I just went so over the top and hit the nail on the head right at the beginning with, and just said, this is a story that takes place in Texas, and let's just put that right up front so you can take that with you into the movie. Because it's ultimately a very tiny, very intimate movie, but knowing that that is where it takes place, I feel like adds a degree of grandeur to it on a very subconscious level even.
So, right, this is your second feature that you've directed. St. Nick you made a couple years ago.
2009 it came
2009.
out, yeah.
Okay, so more than a couple. And you directed a short, at least one short that I've seen, but Pioneer. But
I've done a lot of shorts.
Yeah.
And like somewhere around 2006, 2007, I started getting into film festivals and people.
Yeah, that one sort of caught.
Pioneer went. That was in 2011. That came out, and that did really, really. That played a lot of places. And
right.
Helped pave the way for this movie.
Yeah. So why did you decide to edit and DP and for other people's films? Were you exploring those I don't know.
It's a number of things. I mean, the easiest answer would be to pay the bills, but that certainly wasn't the case because most of them never paid. They're all low budget movies.
Right.
I mean, you do it because you want to learn, and you do it because you have friends who want to make a movie and you want to help them out. And
not everybody does that.
I mean, I feel like it's something that's, when you're trying to learn how to make movies at those early stages, that's the best way to do it, is to just like get in the trenches and figure it out. And so I worked as a PA as well. I worked doing odd jobs on sets, and then, you know, because I needed to make my own movies on my own, I learned how to edit and I learned how to shoot things. And I was never particularly good at being a cinematographer, but I could, you know, frame up a shot and I could get a good exposure or semi-good exposure. And then with editing, I really just took to that, and that was something that I became good at to some extent and was able to turn that into something of a career. But it really all just came out of just wanting to learn and wanting to help people out and not really having an ego about it. I never, when I was working like with Joe Swanberg, it was never a case of like being disgruntled because I was the guy that held the boom mic. It was more a case of, I'm excited that Joe's making a movie, and I'm really excited that he wants me to help, and I'll do whatever I can.
Sure.
That's holding a boom mic or carrying the gear or whatever he wants me to do.
There's a spirit of collaboration and of camaraderie, I suppose you could say. So what did you do with him?
I did Alexander the Last we worked together on, and then he came and shot
Noah Baumbach, I think he produced that.
Yeah, exactly. It was like the first time any of us had gotten any sort of validation from a filmmaker that we admired.
Yeah, right.
I worked on the movie that eventually became Silver Bullets, so that at that point it wasn't Silver Bullets. And then he came to Texas and did a lot of B camera and second unit on St. Nick. So there's a great deal of that movie that he shot.
Chicago and Dallas, finally. More than just a connection of flights or something.
Yeah.
There's actually a connection of filmmaking. That's nice. And then, and then you, obviously Yen Tan lives in Dallas.
Yeah, and now he lives in Austin, but he lived in Dallas for many years.
Okay, right. You edited his films?
I edited his first movie, or I guess his second movie, Chow. I was the editor on that.
Where a friend comes in, the deceased boyfriend.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And then with Pit Stop, his new film, I was planning on being the editor on that. And just to kind of get a head start on that process, I sat down with them and worked on the script with them as well. and ultimately we ended up shooting our movies exactly the same time, so I wasn't able to edit it. But we've known each other for 13, 14 years at this point, and have just always, we've always worked on each other's movies, helped each other out, read each other's scripts, just done whatever.
Yeah, it's such a sort of different sort of type of storyteller in some ways, but I guess that's maybe superficial.
You mean like he's a different type of storyteller?
Yeah, but maybe not. Maybe he's also kind of telling, if you look intimate stories.
Yeah, if you look at everybody's got their own perspective, but for me it feels very similar because we were being influenced by the same filmmakers at the same time, which was like, especially like the Pan-Asian filmmakers like Tsai Ming-liang and Hong Sang-soo. We both were just obsessed with those movies for quite a number of years. And if you look at Saint Nick, you'll see like the influence of that, like with those long takes with no dialogue.
Which I'm trying to remember. Is it a Korean North? Is it one of the Korean filmmakers who that you mentioned, or
Hong Sang-soo?
Yeah,
he's made so many movies in the past few years that I might have missed one. If it had,
no, I'm sure. I'm thinking of somebody else. The guy maybe did Mother and
oh yeah, Bong Joon-ho.
Bong. That's right. I knew I was wrong on that. Anyway,
he wasn't so much. Although Mother, I think, is an exquisite movie. Yeah. Neither of us liked The Host very much, which I was really disappointed by. But I'm excited about his new one.
Yeah, but anyway, sorry. And then but you mentioned Pit Stop, and Amy Simons is in that one as well. Mm-hmm. And then you were also involved in her filming Sun Don't Shine.
I mean, that goes back to Alexander the Last, because that's where I met. She was in that, and that's how I met her, and we became really good friends. And then when Shane Carruth was casting Upstream Color, we recommended that he look at her, and I remember calling her and saying, "Hey, this director is going to be reaching out to you, and if you want to come to Dallas for a couple weeks," and then a couple weeks turned into many months. But and then while she was shooting that, I wound up editing her movie because she didn't have time to edit it herself, and from that I went into Upstream Color. So it was you could take it all back to Alexander the Last, I suppose.
Yeah,
and then after or while she was shooting Upstream Color, Yen was casting Pit Stop and wanted to, talk to her about it, so got them in touch, and it just kept going from there.
All such, terrific. It's been a few great seasons of films then, especially as you say, coming out of that part of the country. Anyway, yeah. Well, I again, let's just repeat then that Ain't Them Body Saints, which is a reference to.
Well, it's not a reference so much. It's the title. The title is meant to evoke the feel of like an old folk song, and like something that is.
It's almost all sounding kind of Faulkner.
Yeah,
too, as like
it
Dying
does.
Or one of those titles.
Yeah,
too.
It's got like a. I wanted to have a title that had some degree of poetry to it. I didn't want it to be like self-consciously poetic and pretentious, although you could certainly accuse it of that. But it's got like a, it has the phrasing of it has a cadence that is partially poetic, partially musical, and it has a rhyme scheme. But also the great thing about it to me is that it is idiomatic in a distinctly American way.
It is, and the moment you use the word saint, you're thinking immediately of Southern Gothic.
Yep.
And South and gospel and all these things that come out of that folk experience.
Yeah, and I mean, I was raised in the Catholic Church, so that naturally leads itself to I can interpret the movie on a thematic level, and the title means something that relates to the movie, but more so than that, I mean, that's something that if you want to go that distance, we can go that distance and just break it down. But more important than that is just the feel of it. And I love the idea of like having a title that isn't something that is referenced in the movie, and it's not a plot point, it's not a character, it's just a phrase that lays the groundwork for what the movie is going to do. And it is you can just take it, have it in your head, carry it into the movie with you, forget about it, but it's kind of it's that first wash on the canvas, and it lays the groundwork for everything that's going to come.
Well, without sounding maudlin, I'm really looking forward to seeing all your work, your future work, and keeping up with your films. And
thank you, great,
yeah, very much so. And I hope you'll come back and the next opportunity. So you're going to be in New York for obviously Rooftop, and then your opening night or weekend.
Yeah, I'll be here
going to LA.
I'll be here Friday and Saturday for doing Q&As both at IFC Center and at Lincoln Center, and then go do the same thing in Texas.
So you're just fuck LA. You don't.
Apparently so. I kind of want to, but
is any of the cast members going to be in New York, or are they going to just?
We're figuring that out right now. Casey, unfortunately, is shooting Christopher Nolan's new movie, so he won't be around.
Unfortunate, not for him.
Yeah, exactly.
but for you,
no, it's exciting. I was like, when he told me he was going to do that, I was very excited.
Yeah. I just feel sorry for his more obscure brother.
I know. Poor guy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. He went to the summer camp that I was a counselor at.
Really?
Ben Affleck, yeah. I think it was just one. I could be wrong, but I think he was there in the mid-'80s, right before he became an adult actor.
Yeah,
that wasn't right. I didn't mean to say it that way. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah,
he was already kind of a child. I think he had already done.
He'd done some like stuff,
some after school special and whatnot. So he's already kind of like known as one of the kid actors. But he came to the camp in Vermont, and I guess he didn't like it. He made a number of really close friends that I think to this day he's still friends with.
Interesting.
But he did not. I guess he didn't go for the summer, even though that. People loved that summer camp and came for years, and to this day, I mean, people that I'm sure you know even didn't mean to go.
I was a counselor there.
What?
And you were a counselor?
I was also a camper, but it wasn't up in Vermont then. It was
okay.
It was here in New York, and they moved up to Vermont in like 79, 80 that time. Yeah, and that's when all of a sudden weird how many people came out of the
right
that ended up going into film, including Darius.
Oh, okay, cool.
But to get back to our show here,
yeah.
But thanks very much for doing this and making the time.
No, thank you.
Really, I mean,
joy to be able to have a chance to talk about the movie we made. That's really, it's my pleasure.
Yeah. Okay. Great. Well, goodbye.
Farewell.